I'm National Geographic Explorer and journalist Paul Salopek. For more than 10 years, I've been walking the Earth, tracing the pathways of the first humans who migrated out of Africa. But I'm never alone.
I'm Arati Kumar-Rao from Bangalore, India. I am an environmental chronicler working in the Indian subcontinent to document our changing landscapes.
I always have someone with me, a walking partner from the place or region I'm passing through, someone with unique local perspective and insight.
When we walked through the state, we would either stay in or be welcomed by gurdwaras, which are the Sikh holy places. The hospitality just blew me away.
Someone with stories to share about their homeland, about the major issues of our time, about the universal joys and challenges of our shared human experience.
I love feeling things fully with all my five senses. And I think when I put on my walking shoes and I'm out walking, that's the best way to feel the landscape. As a storyteller, I think it just brings all the senses alive.
Throughout this global foot journey, walking partners have shared personal narratives about the climate crisis, migration, cultural endurance, history, our vital connections to the natural world, and much, much more. Yet these big topics are always grounded in personal experiences that to me are as relatable as love, hate, and the weather. In this episode, we'll get to know writer, photographer, artist, and National Geographic Explorer Arati Kumar-Rao, who walked with me from the India-Pakistan border in the spring of 2018 into the agricultural Indian state of Punjab and onward through the arid lands of Rajasthan. Walking with Arati on this leg of the journey was an education for me. Here's a person who has multiple advanced degrees, but above and beyond that, school learning has just an unquenchable curiosity about the world around her. Together, we sought out extremely rare river dolphins, noted the troubling impacts of extensive industrial agriculture, and talked to the Punjabi youth who were fleeing this storied Indian breadbasket for foreign shores. More after this on love, hate, and the weather.
I grew up in Bombay, and I consider myself very much a Bombay girl. And when I was growing up, it was called Bombay, which is why I still refer to it as Bombay. It's now called Mumbai. We lived in a fairly wooded colony in a tiny little suburb of Bombay, and it was very quiet, and I had all the space and the trees and the birds and cycling paths and things like that, tennis courts, swimming pools, all kinds of things. So it was a pretty privileged childhood, something quite different from what most people growing up in Bombay experience. My father is an engineer, but also an environmentalist who marched with the Save the Western Ghats movement in the 1980s. And so nature walks, especially every Sunday morning, were par for the course at home. Mom is a school teacher and insisted on good communication skills for both my sister and for me. When I graduated from college, undergrad, I had made a list of 50 things that I wanted to do in my life before I died. I don't know why I made that, but anyways, I found it the other day, and the top three were all this, follow this river, follow that river, travel this part. I've always wanted to travel overland from Xi'an to Istanbul, following the Silk Route. So various things. Those were my aspirations, to basically do things slowly and document landscapes.
While I may be walking through the global headlines of our times, my daily encounters with ordinary people at boot level keeps things pretty grounded, pretty intimate, and very human. What do I hear over and over again in these conversations across the world? Well, Whether it's a camel nomad in Ethiopia or a conceptual artist in China, we always get down to the universals. Who do you love? What do you hate? And, of course, the weather.
The minute I first met Paul is so vivid in my mind. It was the 27th of February, 2018. And Paul had been parked in Lahore for quite a while, and unfortunately, he'd picked up a stomach bug, and so he was delayed. So we were, kind of ready on this side of the border, waiting for him to come. Of course, it's a heavily patrolled area and stuff like that. And there's a border crossing and waiting. And I remember saying, okay, I'm just going to pop over to the restroom and come back and, hoping Paul will make it out by then. And I go to the restroom, and when I come out, I see this man standing, well, he's the only white guy there, standing with these two huge donkey bags by his side and a backpack. And I was like, okay, this has to be Paul, right? So I go up from behind him and I ask him, Paul, what would you do if I didn't show up? And he turned around with this huge smile and he says, I'd just start walking.
It was a day of great anticipation. I'd be communicating with you, Arati, for years, literally, right? Exchanging story ideas. And so I was really looking forward to meeting you.
It was so fun. We stopped, we had some chai at the border before we set off.
From a street vendor who I remember had this kind of electric smile, right? This guy selling chai right outside the immigration office.
That's right. And I have a photograph, Paul, of us, the three of us, you, me, and the chai vendor. And I remember I was so petrified of slowing you down because I wasn't sure. I had never walked with someone who was walking the world, of course. And so I was so petrified of slowing you down that I set off at this pace and you were like, wait, stop. Why are you walking so fast?
Yeah, I was at that point, I got a little worried. So yes, I thought, okay, I'm going to have to kind of up my game, catch up with Arati. Yeah.
But then I think the joke was on me because I had no clue that I had to pace myself because I came down with the worst blisters that day. I remember. Yes. We stopped that night at the Amritsar, and I was so embarrassed because here was Paul Salopek, 2-time Pulitzer Prize-winning National Geographic fellow, who is sitting at my feet and nursing my feet, which is just blistering up. And I was like, "Oh my God, what have I done?"
You were such a stoic. You did not complain at all. You were walking on raw nerve ending by the end of that day. It was super hot. It was the beginning of a very hot walk, right? Through India on tarmac road, no less, which is like walking on top of a hot griddle. So your poor feet, yeah. In terms of nursing feet, you weren't the first, believe me. I've learned to nurse a few.
I think what I was most looking forward to when I walked was to see how the landscape would change, because we were walking from one state which is extremely agricultural, so very, very green and lush, and that's because of artificial irrigation and canals and so on.
I'd never been to India before this journey, and the moment I stepped over the Pakistani border into India was like a curtain raising on a new world. I didn't know what to expect beyond the stereotypes that I'd seen in movies or read about in books. And walking across northern India from west to east did, from the Pakistan border to the Myanmar border, and that was about a year and a half, maybe 2,400 miles, close to 4,000 kilometers, it allowed me to sample this kaleidoscopic human and natural landscape. India, for me, was a cosmos of villages. Every day we'd walk through 2, 3, 4, 10, 15 villages, all of them spaced, 1 or 2 miles apart, and each of them unique. This is what's incredible. This is what slowing down does for you. Had I taken a train or a car past these villages, they would smear past the windows and seem almost monotonous. But by slowing down to a walking pace, Arati and I got to sample their unique vibe. Every village had its own personality. And that's boggling because there must be hundreds of thousands of villages in India.
Punjab is the state where the Green Revolution in India was most widely adopted, but I think it's almost 90% agricultural.
I was surprised to see a lot of wheat. I didn't know that wheat would be grown in such latitudes. It seemed very warm to me. Wheat has always been associated as a northern crop. So as an outsider, that was a surprise.
What's interesting about this state is that the Sikh religion, people of the Sikh religion, populate a large part of the state. We stayed in the head priest of the Gurdwara's home in a couple places, and we'd be woken by the kirtans, which are the chanting and the religious songs, at 2 a.m. because that's when they start. And at every point, if we were hungry or if we wanted water or anything, we'd be welcomed into these places of worship. And it was just a wonderfully welcoming beginning, I felt, to the walk through India.
Yeah, I agree, Afi. It was a very wide open door of warmth and hospitality. It was a wonderful place for me to begin my introduction to India. The incredible openness and big-heartedness of Punjabis. It was just, hard to match. We were treated like family. There was genuine curiosity, not just in what we were doing out walking, but also concern for our well-being. Right, Afti? I mean, we were asked also many times, like, what are you guys crazy out walking at this time of year, at this time of day? And people were very eager to help, relieve our aches and pains and to get us out of the heat as much as possible. So it was a warm embrace.
So we reached Amritsar in late February, and then we started walking somewhere through the middle of March. That was the harvest season in Punjab. And there's like tons of traffic, huge trucks carrying grain and tractors blaring music that are just kind of rumbling by, and it was noisy as hell. And unfortunately, the way Punjab is, everything is tarmac, and we were searching for places where we could get off the road and kind of walk the back streets.
So, normally when we travel these days, we take a plane if it's a long distance, or we take a car or a train if it's a bit shorter. We are traveling these days in straight lines because the object of moving in our motorized age is to annihilate time and space. It's to squeeze the time and the geography between us and whatever destination we're traveling to. The Out of Eden Walk is completely antithetical to that. The Out of Eden Walk is about using our bodies to hug the human and natural landscape, to make points of contact with our feet in basically following the flow of each daily encounter, whether it's with a mountain or a river or a village or a city. The result is, if you look at my GPS track across the world, it is like spaghetti. It's full of squiggles and zigzags. It is the opposite of straight.
We did manage in a few places, and we walked by a canal. And I remember Paul telling me that it takes 20 meters. It's 20 meters off of the highway and you get silence. So it's just that that's the difference between really loud traffic sounds and then just the birds and the trees rustling and so on. Paul, do you remember the time when we were walking along the canal and those people came up to us and said, be really careful because Punjab has a huge drug problem. There were these two old Sikh men who came up to us and said, why are you walking in this area? This is not safe for you and you need to come home, And we said, no, we're walking and we're fine walking. But they insisted on us going home. And Paul, do you remember there were these young kids who were going to go off to Canada? And we had, we met them and we were talking about how agriculture was no longer viable for them.
Yeah, that was one memorable exchange, Arati, with Punjabis. I think the kind of a strain of conversation that surfaced again and again in my memory walking through that very rich agricultural zone was the surprising counterpoint of many kind of middle-aged farmers, men and women, saying our children don't have much of a future here, of just how hard it was to keep that green machine going with expenses, right? Buying fertilizers, pesticides, paying for, whatever machinery is needed. So, you and I got used to the youngsters walking up to us when they would see us and, they would see me being a foreigner, practice their English. And I thought it was just, these are very dedicated students and, they're hyper responsible and they want good grades. Well, no, they were trying to prepare for immigration tests, and they had somebody close at hand to practice on before they went to take these tests. It was actually very sobering for me.
Yeah, and Paul, actually, it's interesting. Some of these kids are still in touch with me. The ones that went to Canada, they're still in touch, and so it's really interesting to see how they're negotiating life there now in a completely different country.
I think you'd agree, Arati, that it was a bit surreal because we even passed through a city that the main street had English school after English school after English school. So yeah, you and I stepped into a few of them, as I remember, and just all this energy, this kind of incredible oomph that was just bursting out of these classrooms of again, young people, young men and young women, trying to get their language over some strange artificial barrier to get them out of Punjab. It's not easy to do this. These are sometimes families that don't have the resources to kind of put, their children through extra schooling. So it was a priority. But still, just kind of like, what's going to happen to them and what's going to happen to mom and dad staying behind on the farm?
They might visit back. The children that went abroad from Punjab might visit, but they don't see a future in this country, in India, and so they've gone there to work and make a life for themselves there.
We all read about globalization. We all participate in one way or another in this phenomenon of our modern age of being connected together, not just through products and services, but through pop culture, right? I encountered yak herders in the Pamir Mountains of Tajikistan, one of the most remote inhabited landscapes that I walked through, who had smartphones, right? And so they're as wired in as anybody living in New York City. This is unique and unprecedented in our time. I don't think there's been any point in 300,000 years of our species' history where we've been connected into this global hive mind as we are today. It's affecting our collective consciousness in a way that we can never know or predict. But walking somehow like a blade cuts through that all. It cuts through the buzz. It cuts through the distractions, and it cuts down to the human bone of our shared experience.
As we pushed through Punjab, we came to the confluence of two huge tributaries of the Indus River, the Beas and the Satluj. And here, we were to be treated to a most wonderful surprise. The Indus River dolphins are found primarily in the Indus River system. The Indus River starts from the glaciers in Tibet, and then it flows through India and then into Pakistan. And the five tributaries, major tributaries of the Indus, flow also through India. And we were walking to two of these tributaries, actually. The confluence of these two tributaries called the Beas and the Satluj. And just south of the confluence, there is this dam, which then diverts the water, as we spoke about, to the Indira Gandhi Canal, which then takes the water to the desert, and so it stops it from flowing off into Pakistan. This is through the Indus River Agreement, the River Water Sharing Agreement, and we were walking to this little town where the dam is, which diverts the water. And we reached the town, and we didn't have a place to stay. And we went and found a government guest house, which was one of those really strange experiences, right, Paul? Do you remember that strange guest house we stayed in?
Yes. Yeah,
Where the
stepping back in
caretaker was
time.
most interested in Paul's closet.
Yes. Mysterious
Yeah.
goings on in government guest houses.
And Paul, I unfortunately caught a bug there, and he was down, and he was also writing at that time. So he was closeted in his room, and there was some downtime for me, and I decided that I'd go to the riverside. And why I decided that was because of a Wikipedia entry on this wetland, which is formed behind the dam. Which said, there was just this one line which said that Indus River dolphins were spotted here in 2007, and ever since they're there. And I was like, really? I had no idea that Indus River dolphins were found on the Indian side. I kind of given up on seeing them ever, because I wouldn't be probably allowed into Pakistan. And so I was like, okay, let me see what I can find. And so I set off one day in the general direction of the river. I didn't even know how to get to the river, frankly. And I told the taxi driver to just take me to the nearest bank of the river. And I hopped off the taxi, and there was a boatman who was coming towards the bank. And I just asked him, have you ever heard of the dolphin? And I used the local word for the dolphin, bhulan. I thought he'd say, no, I've never seen it, or something like that. And I was just blown away when he said, I saw two of them swimming upriver just 5 minutes ago. And I was like, no way. And I was like, oh, can you please take me there? I want to see it. And he said, well, I'm ferrying people across the river. If you want, you can jump on the boat as I ferry people, and you can, kind of look for your dolphins. And I did jump on the boat. And not 10 minutes after jumping on that boat, I saw my first Indus River dolphins, not one, but two, mother and baby. They were surfacing and ducking under the water right in front of me, Paul. I messaged you, I remember, fishing out my phone and just frantically messaging you saying, Paul, you won't believe what I'm seeing right now. I'm seeing two Indus dolphins in front of me. And I was, I think, squealing in delight at the magnificent sight.
Well, Arati holed up back at the guest house, feverish and on deadline as usual. I couldn't believe it. I smacked my aching head. It's like, how many Indus dolphins are known to exist on the Indian side? It's like low double digits, right?
11, yes. 11.
So 11, right? So you go out. I'm sick. I'm laying low in the heat in a government guest house with a caretaker who is rummaging through my closet, and I get your text, and I think you're just out scouting. You're kind of out to kind of catch a little air moving around, and the hope of seeing some of the 11 estimated Indus River dolphins in India is like so infinitesimally small that I thought you were joking at first, and I couldn't believe it that you saw them, and you saw more than one. It was like a miracle.
Yeah, and I think I kept going back. I just couldn't get enough. And then I didn't even need to go on the boat. I remember starting to spot them right from the bank itself. And I remember, Paul, when you felt a little bit better, you came. And on the first boat ride, we didn't really see them. But then the next day in the morning, the day we were leaving, we went back. And then we spotted all of them from the bank itself. And it was, do you remember that?
Yeah, I do indeed. It was astonishing. I don't know. Do you think that population figure is askew, or we were just incredibly lucky?
No, I think they hang out in that area because it's very close to the it's to the wetland, and so they get a lot of food and so on. And I think it's the same population. And funnily enough, the 11 of them are a breeding population. So we're hoping that stays. As we pushed south from Punjab into the desert state of Rajasthan, the weather on our walk got really interesting. Now, in the desert, in the height of summer, the mercury was touching maybe 48 Celsius, which is about 116 Fahrenheit, and on some days, a cool 120 Fahrenheit even.
I think the heat on some of those days was a physical force. It was like a physical, palpable, concrete entity where after, going above 45 degrees or whatever, 105 degrees Fahrenheit, it just became like a physical weight. I mean, I remember thinking that the rays of the sun were pounding on the top of my rucksack, adding to its weight, making the straps dig even deeper into my shoulders. Arati, you've written about climate change in India and especially cultures with traditional knowledge systems that have adapted to climate over the years, and specifically this part of India. What do you think about the forces of climate change on the people living there today?
It's interesting. Through the walk itself, we did ask the shepherds we walked with, the shepherdesses we walked with. In fact, I remember one lady saying, "You can't tell anymore when it's going to rain. We used to be able to tell earlier that this is when the rain would come, but now it comes at any time, and it's crazy hot at times when it should have been raining, and so on." So I think they do notice that the patterns are changing. They may not give it the name of climate change. They may not know that that's happening. They just know that something's changing and something's not quite predictable anymore. And it's gotten wetter and crazier in some places where it shouldn't be, and just things coming at just the wrong time and in all at once when it should have been spaced out and things like that. Well, do you remember once when it was an incredibly hot day and we had a sandstorm chasing us? Do you remember that day?
That was incredible. That was
beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. It was angry yellow. The sky was an angry yellow, and we were like, "Oh my God, sandstorm! We have to find some place to stop before that." And we reached this little village where they said, "Okay, you can take shelter in the school," and there was just no way we could have spent the night there. There was no water, there was nothing there. And then we said, "Okay, let's ask for the headman of the village." And the headman graciously took us in, and the minute we reached his home, the sandstorm came through, and there was lightning, thunder, and blowing sand. It was crazy. It came right through the house.
They gave us a wonderful meal. They gifted us this amazing meal, but the sand was inside. The sandstorm was inside the room as well. I had trouble seeing you across the table.
Yeah, the sand came right through. It was crazy. But soon after the sandstorm had passed, it began to rain. There was thunder and lightning, and it was just pouring down, and it just kind of cleansed the air of all the dust. It was quite magical. The next morning, we woke up to peafowl calls, and we stepped out of the headman's house, and we saw all these peacocks on the cell tower. There were peacocks with these long tails and peahens, and they were all there and calling, and that was our wake-up call. It was quite magical and a very, very clean, crisp blue-skied morning. I felt that this country it cannot be contained in any one frame. It cannot be condensed or summarized in any way at all, because it's just it's messy. It's messy. I think for a storyteller, and for me as a storyteller, it's invaluable. I just will never, ever, ever tire of going out there, putting my walking shoes on and going out there, because I know the minute I step out, I'm going to be able to find something that is going to pique my interest, and I will be able to come back with the story. And this just the variety of it is. It just stuns me, and it continues to stun me. It stuns me every time I go out into this country.
Moving slowly and storytelling slowly, I think encourages me and my walking partners, and I hope my readers, to kind of think about where we each are in this river of history, in this landscape of time on this planet that we share. It's simple. There's very little that can be more simple than walking, but it's such a powerful tool about being awake and alert in the moment, right? Every day of our lives. And walking with Arati was like walking with somebody who had this in her system, who intuited this revelation even before we met. It was like walking with a person that was very old and had this knowledge for a very long time. Very familiar. It was a joy. Want more? To read my dispatches spanning a global walk from Africa to my current position in China, or to peruse our collection of photos, videos, and audio recordings along the trail, visit natgeo.org to learn more about the Out of Eden Walk. If today's conversation inspires you to share your own stories in place, then I encourage you to visit Home Stories, our crowdsourced global storytelling map designed to bring together a multitude of perspectives around a common theme of where we call home and why. This podcast is a production of the National Geographic Society Impact Story Lab in collaboration with National Geographic Explorer Paul Salopek and the Out of Eden Walk. It was developed by Chris Dye and Taylor Schulke. The production team is led by executive producer Devar Ardalan, together with senior producer Eli Chen, fact-checker Julie Beer, and sound designer Hansdale Su. For the Impact Story Lab, executive producers are Vanessa Surreo and Caitlin Yarnell. Director of Production and Development is Chris Dye. Director of Impact is Sarah Joseph. Senior producer is Mary Stevens. Producer is Taylor Schulke. Production manager is Maida Furanti Kohea. And our production coordinator is Jessica Wang. Our theme song was composed by Push Audio. And I'm Paul Salopek, continuing my journey with the Out of Eden Walk, currently traversing China.